I came across this URL. It's titled "What is Decision Intelligence?" It's written by nrule.com. I've then copy and pasted this in Quillbot, which has an AI detection filter. And what I noticed was that it was coming up as 95% likely generated by AI. Now, what I'm going to do is run this URL into the Humanizer agent that I've built in n8n with the goal of really trying to bring this AI detection to the sub 50, sub 40% at worst, at best, maybe around the sort of sub 10%. Let's see what it comes out with. So I'm just going to send this for submission. What's happening first off is the Appify app is scraping the content from the URL. It then passes it through our Humanizer agent. It's then passed to a formatter. This ensures that all the text is put into Markdown. And then these final notes here, it just creates the Google Doc. And then what we can do, if we open up this last node, we will get an ID that looks like this. If we then go into a blank document, we can paste the ID into the URL at the top here, and we get an article that looks a little bit like this. This isn't enriched text. We need it enriched text. So what we can do is copy and paste this. We then need to jump into a markdown to docx. There's plenty of these available. Paste it. And then what this does is it puts it into a nice format with the headings and everything like that. So it gives us an output. Looks a little bit like this, and this is in a better position for us to paste it into the AI detector. If I go back into the AI detector, if I clear this and then repaste the text, we can see that it's coming out at 43%, which is a stark improvement on the 95%. Now, what I'm going to do today is walk you through how to build this Humanizer. Now, if you don't want to build it, you can click the link in the description, sign up to the form. You'll be sent a Notion board that looks a little bit like this. This Notion board has all the show notes for every video I've ever created. If you select the top result here, you can quite simply download the workflow and upload it into your n8n ready to use. Now, a couple of points that I want to add for diving into this. So you should always use a copy editor to check the content that comes out the other side. I do also advocate to actually use a human in the loop when creating content, even if it's AI assisted, because the content that I see ranking best and most consistently actually uses real human experiences that AI cannot replicate. So I still advocate for using a human in the loop. Don't just AI create your content through any workflows. Make sure that there is a person or people involved in this process. The optimal hybrid approach is using an expert alongside AI. So it's an AI assisted piece, but it uses their real experiences. And that is how you can get the best of both worlds. Okay. And one final thing, if you don't know who I am, my name's Ben Alfrey. I'm co-founder of Session Media. We're a B2B performance marketing agency. If you're considering AI search as part of your marketing stack for next year, then jump into session-media.com, select Get Proposal, and fill in the form below. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to dive straight into the video. Now, the first thing we need to set up is a form trigger. This is the mechanism to kick off the whole workflow. And we're just going to call it URL. We're going to add a form element, which is URL. It's going to be a text. It's just going to be an open text field. Looks a little bit like that. And then we're good to get started. Now, the next node is an HTTP request because we need to connect to our Appify. So we do this because we need something to scrape the URL. Now, you could just copy and paste it. Of course, I like to automate this as much as we can. So Appify, if you jump onto appify.com, sign up for an account, you essentially can connect to several different crawlers that can undertake different tasks. So what we're looking for is a crawler that can essentially crawl text from a specific URL. So what I'm going to do is just type in fast content website crawler. Fast URL content crawler. This looks about right. And what we can do is actually just give it a bit of a test run. So before we commit to it, find the URL that you're wanting to run or test, jump back into Appify, paste it, and then start. So without sort of committing to the API, we can actually see if we get the output that we're looking for. So we've got a success message here. We can see it's pennies on the pound to crawl this stuff. I go to the output. We can see the page title, and then it's pulled the text. What is decisioning intelligence in today's hyper-competitive environment? This looks about right from memory. What is decision intelligence, reshaping enterprise in today's hyper-competitive environment? Okay, cool. So we found a crawler that can successfully scrape content. So what we need to do is plug in the API endpoint so that when we fire the trigger from our workflow, it can call the actor, is what they're known as in Apify, and start doing these runs automatically. So what you need to do, you come back onto the homepage here. Now, I think the first thing is always quite important is do just check out the information, some use cases. You can check all of the runs you do, whether manually or via the API down here. If you come over to the right-hand side, select API and select API endpoints. Now, you will need an Apify account, of course, and when you have an Apify account, if you scroll down to run actor synchronously and get dataset items, it will give you the exact URL with your API key attached at the bottom here. And all you need to do is copy this key, come back into your workflow and paste the URL. Now, one thing to note is that we are posting a request. We're seeking information from the endpoints. We need to make sure that this is a post. And then we also need to give it some information as to what we're looking for. So typically when you set up an HTTP request via Apify and with most sort of API endpoints, you need to toggle send body, make sure it's JSON, scroll down to using JSON in the specified body. And then if you come back into the Apify actor, you should be able to pull the JSON fields that you can just drop straight into your HTTP request. So if I go back to input where we added our URL, at the top here, if you select JSON, we've got the exact body text that we need in our node. So we're just going to copy this and we're going to paste this directly in the JSON field. So it looks a bit like this. So it's a very, very simple setup. Now, what we want to do is essentially we want the URL to be used from the input that we put into the form. So just to start this, I'm just going to run a dummy run so we can start using the dynamic field. So if I run execute workflow, I'm going to paste the URL, select submit, that's successfully submitted. And now the API has called the actor in Apify and the actor is now scraping the content and we can see that it's done that successfully. What I want to do is essentially, because I'm not always going to be using this URL, I want the Apify actor to only scrape the URL that I put into the form, of course. So what I'm going to do is remove this URL here, and I'm going to drag this JSON property in between the two. Oh, that hasn't done it properly. I'm going to drag the JSON property that's up at the top here and put them in between the speech marks up at the top here. And what this means is that whatever URL I put into the form is going to dynamically pull into the JSON body and fire that off to the actor. So again, if I give this another test run, I'll just execute step, we can see that the URL down here is the same as the one up at the top here. And in theory, it should give us the same result on the right-hand side. Awesome, node success, and we can see that it still pulled the text and the page title, so everything we wanted, so that's fantastic. Now what we need to do is send this text into our Humanizer agent. So I do have a prompt for this, and I will put this into the Notion board, but to set this up, we need an AI agent. We then need to select the source for the prompts, which is essentially defined below. And we also need to add a system message. So we need to give it the prompts. So we need to ask it what to do. And then we also need to give it some guardrails. We need to give it some context. So in our user message, prompt we're running with is rewrite the following text according to the rules below. So in the system message, do not change the factual meaning, URLs, links, keywords. Basically, we don't want any of the actual context of the meaning of the text to change. We just want to humanize it, right? And then the text, we need to make sure that it's pulling from the text from the output from the Apify scrape. So if I get rid of this, how that's pulled is quite simply just pulling it from the left-hand side, from the input, into the middle, into the brain. And then we can see an example of what the output should be. So helpfully, n8n gives us a nice sort of green tick box if it recognizes the JSON field that we've pulled in. Now in the system message, again, I have a predefined system message, which I've just pasted. I'm just going to show you guys what this looks like. So you are a humanizing rewrite engine. Your job is to rewrite text that reads exactly like a human wrote it. And then I've given it some rules as well. And really, this is where you can maybe play around with it, maybe make it more specific to your organization or the content piece that you're doing this for. But one thing to bear in note here is that this is fixed because we're not using any JSON. Up at the top here, you need to make sure that you've got expression toggled. Otherwise, if you have a look, if I select fixed down here, you'll notice this isn't green. So this will just be seen as text. So make sure that this is defined as an expression. Now what I'm going to do is just execute this step. And you'll notice that I've got an error here. And the reason I've got an error is I haven't connected it to any AI model. So down in the bottom left here, you can see that you can pretty much attach any particular AI model if you have a preference. Now, for me, I always use OpenRouter. OpenRouter gives us access to pretty much any model across the globe. And what I recommend doing is signing up to OpenRouter because you then can use any model across the world, and it all sort of funnels through OpenRouter. So it means that I can reduce the number of different AI systems that I'm setting up. The reduction in the number of AI systems that I'm setting up means that there's a lower chance for things to go wrong, quite simply. And the best way to set up one of these is at the OpenRouter node, select credentials, go to the OpenRouter website, and create an API key. Very, very simple and straightforward to start. And then what this means you can do is you can pretty much select any model that you wish to use. Now, because it's just a rewrite, I just use GPT 4.1. You could also use Claude and various other bits like that. So once that's set up, we should be in a position now where we execute and the humanizer gets to work. Okay, we've got our output and this is what it's given us. As we can see, it looks relatively successful without reading it. We can see that it's given us a lot of content. We can see that the formatting is obviously not in the desired format that we want. Now at this point, it's up to you as to whether you are quite happy with this, you want to leave it. I like to tidy things up and add a final endpoint, which is usually a Google Doc, and then a notification in Slack or something like that. So what I like to do now is always add a formatter just to tidy up sometimes we get a bit of sort of JSON that's left in some of the text and some of the formatting. Depends how complex the prompt is, to be totally honest with you. So what I like to do, and again, this is more optional, but I always add like a formatter in here. Again, run it in a similar way as you did your last AI agent. So we have defined below, we have our prompt at the top, and we have our system message. And I've got a predefined prompt that I'm just going to drop into here. Pasting this in, make sure it's an expression. You are a formatter, your job is to take the JSON output. And again, if I get rid of this, remember, we can just quite simply drag this into our prompt. So the prompt will always reference the inputs on the left-hand side when considering its action. Your formatter, your job is to take the output and format it into rich text for a Google Doc. Do not change, amend, remove. Now I know, or from my experience anyway, the best we can get is Markdown format in a Google Doc, but that's fine because we've got a Markdown to Doc converter freely available. So this just tidies up all the formatting and ensures that it's all in that single Markdown format. The system message, I'm going to drop in my predefined prompt, which again is a bit of a guardrail on making sure that none of the content is changing. Use all of the content in the links, and essentially just telling it that it's only there to format. This is why still using humans in this process is critical, because although we give it as many guardrails as we can, like we don't give it much room to go wrong. And as the models have evolved and the sophistication has evolved, I think the amount of hallucinations given the context window does reduce, but it's highly recommended anyway to use a copy editor just to give it a full read and tidy up anyway. So given that context, we're still going to try and get as best output as we can. And again, I've hit execute step. Why is it not working? Because I need to connect my chat model. And again, I'm going to use OpenRouter 4.1. And you'll see that it attaches down at the bottom down here. You don't need to use the memory or the tool in this process. And what this now means is that I should be able to execute the step. and it should start whirring away. Awesome. So this has now been formatted. So this will all be in Markdown. I can feel quite confident in that. And the next part is just passing it to a Google Doc. So creating a Google Doc is very much a process in itself with n8n. You need a node to create the doc, then a node to update the text into the doc. There isn't a universal node at the moment that allows you to do both of those actions in one hit. So what we're going to do is go to Google Docs and we're going to create a document. If you haven't already, you just need to create a project in Cloud Console or in Google's new AI Studio, get an API key. You do need to then go into Cloud Console. Once you've created your project, come into the left-hand side here, go into Library, go to Google Docs and just enable. And this means that you can use an API when communicating with Google Docs. It's very straightforward. Now, obviously, I've already set up credentials in the past. So when I go to Google Docs account, I've already got my credential. Once you have your API key, just go to create new credentials, add your client ID and your client secret, and you are off to the races. So I've already used a predefined account that I've already created. The resources document, the operation is create, and then add it into your drive of choice and your folder of choice, and then you can give it a title. So let's call this Decision Intelligence. Now you'll notice I haven't added the code node, which is create title meta URL. It's because we don't actually need it. I just carried that node over from a different workflow that I was using, but we don't really need it. What I've done is just I've executed the step. It won't move the text into the document. This node here will just create the document, so nothing will actually happen with the text. And whilst this is going on, I'm actually going to create the second node, which is the update document text. So update a document, again, same credentials, document, this time update instead of create. And then what we should do is get the doc ID from the left-hand side that we can pull through, and then tell it to pull the text as a JSON field into the open text field down here. But we just need to wait for the create document node to complete. And whilst I'm waiting for that, I'm going to pin all of this. I'm just going to pin these just in case we run into an issue. That means I have to start all the way from the beginning again. So as you go through and build these things, it's always good to just pin along the way as well. Formatter, create document, awesome. So the create document has given us an ID, which is fantastic. That means we can pull that ID into there. So this is telling the update document node which document we actually want to update. And then this is a very straightforward process of telling it what to do. So the object is text. We want to insert into the body at the end of the position, but there's nothing in the document. And then the text, we just need to go back to our formatter node and then drop the output in here. And then once we hit execute, what we'll notice is the ID that's given here will now update with the content that's being given in the output of the formatter. So a little trick with Google Docs is you can actually just input the ID after the / following a deal, something like that, and before the edit URL string, basically. So this is the ID of any document. So not the most user-friendly thing in the world, but if I jump back into our workflow, I copy this, I can paste, I'm essentially replacing it, and then hit paste, we can get our content down here. And then what I can do, the final step with this is, as I said, this is all in Markdown. So we want to turn it into sort of rich text, because when you drop Markdown into an AI detector, it's not always the purest way to give full sort of detection. Now, again, how do I feel about AI detectors? I think they're not amazing, but I appreciate that sometimes it's good to have a benchmark, and some companies are quite sort of anti-high AI detection in content that goes out, whatever. I don't think this will be a major thing in the coming year or so, but some cases it is at the moment. Anyway, I detour. If you Google Markdown to doc, select the first one, M converter, hit paste, hit start. And then what this does is it converts it into that rich text and it downloads it into a docx and then fires it open like this. And then that is pretty much the process. Super straightforward. I have a lot of fun building this stuff for you guys. I'm super excited as to sort of the direction things are going in. If you've liked this video, if you found it helpful, please do hit like, please subscribe, and drop me a comment. You know, how are you finding the humanization workflow? Again, if you want access to this workflow directly, or the one that I shared at the start of the video, click the link in the description, sign up to the n8n board, and you can freely download this so you can get on and get started without building it. If you've reached this point, thanks so much, and I will see you on the next video.